Okay, good morning. We have kind of a late start this morning, but it's a very, very special morning because we have a wonderful guest here for the morning talk. And yeah, we met a couple of months ago at the Internet Archive, and it was really a fascinating experience. And I would like to thank you, Christy and Kevin, for really introducing us to Brewster Kahle. And we were deeply impressed by his work and the work of all the Internet Archive crew. And we were even more excited to hear that Brewster also is very passionate about decentralized web, decentralized technologies. And so we thought we are bold and invite him over to our small community. And so I would like to welcome and please give Brewster a hand.
So I get to be the only person using PowerPoint, I think, and I'm glad this gathering is happening. The Internet Archive. Oh, no, I'll just jump into it. So I think we need to lock the web open. That if we're in a position to be able to make it so that openness is irrevocable, can we make that happen? And I'd suggest actually we have the technology to do this. One of my heroes, Larry Lessig, famously said, "Code is law." That the way our code is implemented, how the web works, will presume how we interact online. And because our online lives are becoming so big part of our lives, this is an important part of how we make all of this work. So we need to bake into the structure of the web our values, whether it's freedom of expression, universal access to all knowledge. But it turns out that it's not. It turns out that it's really quite fragile. We know this because at the Internet Archive, we collect about 1 billion web pages every week. And we know that the web, every 100 days is the average life of a web page before it's either changed or it's deleted. So they blink on and off servers. But it is massive. So we have access everywhere in the world, kind of, unless you're in China, and then you can't get to anything on the Internet Archive, or the New York Times and a bunch of other sites. So we're now starting to see a segmentation of how this whole thing works, so that the web is not reliable. Turns out the web is also not private. We know, thanks to Snowden, that the people that went to WikiLeaks website, just to read WikiLeaks website, was monitored by the JCHQ, which was then turned over to the NSA, which qualified them for extra access. Oh, sorry about the flickering slides. We can't figure out how to turn PowerPoint Auto Advance off. So we have a system that is not reliable and not private. But we do have a system that is fun. The web has actually been completely a fun environment that allows people to come in and play and do all sorts of things. So out of the big 3 priorities I'd suggest for a system like the web, of privacy, reliability, and fun, we got 1 out of 3. So can we build something that has 3 out of 3? And I'd say the answer is yes. So we can build something that's reliable, so that it's not going to go down based on servers or countries or censorship, or and we can have something that is private, so you can read something and not be spied on is what it is you're looking at, and it can be still fun and open so that millions of inventive people can go and build on the infrastructure without having to go and ask permission of people, and it sort of becomes something kind of wacko and interesting. So how can we actually do this? And I'd suggest it's a distributed web. That we can, if we design it right this time around, we can build a distributed web. So what's distributed? Isn't the web already distributed? Well, yes, kind of, except that if you nail any particular part of some server, or AWS for that matter, or the Internet Archive, the large hunks of the web basically become completely unavailable. Can we get around that? And the internet structure, for instance, underlying the web, is a distributed system in the sense that it was designed such that if any piece of it gets nuked, it still would work. Cool. So that's different from how the web works. Or if we take Amazon.com, the cloud also is in some sense like a distributed system. It's data centers all over the world, and if you put your stuff up on it in the right way, it will move it from server to server to get it closer to the users. If something goes down, it goes and puts it on other servers. If it gets extra use, you can configure it to go and put more up. Wouldn't it be great if the World Wide Web worked like a gigantic Amazon cloud that wasn't all owned by one organization? I think this is all quite possible. So what also do we want out of such a system? We want to make it so that reader privacy is ensured, so that you can feel comfortable going to things that may not be such that if everyone knew you were looking at it, you'd want that to happen. We in the library world are really quite conscious of the concept of reader privacy and how important that is to ensure. We also should build in versions this time so that it's reliable and it's distributed. So let's have a time access to the web. The Internet Archive built the Wayback Machine to build time access on top of the web as kind of a kludge on top of it. It really wasn't designed to be archived in the first place, and a time access has never been really woven into the web except sort of as a glue-on like the Internet Archive's Wayback Machine. So let's fix that this time around. How can we go and build all of this? Well, there's some technologies that we've got that Tim Berners-Lee didn't have when doing the original web. We've got blockchain type distributed database structure, which is awesome and important. We have Bitcoin, which might actually allow us to actually have a distributed payment system that allows people to go and make things available with micropayments, which we've never really been able to do before. JavaScript has gotten to be incredible. JavaScript, you can run whole emulators of operating systems in JavaScript now. So you can boot an IBM PC or an old Macintosh in JavaScript in your browser. That means that it's a whole programming platform. And given that Apple is starting to make it so you can't download things unless they approve it, this may be the only open programming layer that we really have to get to large-scale distribution, especially on mobile. So JavaScript, I'd say, is a very important component to what we might want to build the next generation web structure on top of. We also have public key encryption, which at the time of sort of Tim Berners-Lee in the early web was illegal to go and distribute based on NSA driven laws in the United States. So we have certain technologies that we can go and build on. And there's been some progress towards this. So I thought I'd just list in fuzzy form some of the pieces that we're getting there on. What I'd suggest is a goal, and would love, love, love help, and I'd love people to go and say how the Internet Archive can help you in building towards this, is building a WordPress-like equivalent. So can we get the functionality of WordPress blogs, which and make that so that it works in a serverless distributed system? What would this mean? It would mean that you can go and build a website that has identities that have different roles, so that you'd have administrators and commenters and that sort of thing. You can make layouts that it would be really punchy and fast, that you could do updates like comments and the like, and all of this would work with also a versioning system. We'd want this to work in a distributed way on the net, and I'd suggest at the JavaScript layer. So if we could distribute WordPress blogs such that it was peer-to-peer, there's no one server that you're going to be able to get this blog. You just call it, say by saying brewstersblog.nl or something like that, and it would appear. You'd be able to see it, add comments to it, have your different roles, have a distributed identity system. If we could make a WordPress work in JavaScript in a peer-to-peer way, I'd suggest we really have something going for us. There are some other projects that are really making some progress, not necessarily towards that goal, but definitely overlapping. Maelstrom by BitTorrent it's not in JavaScript. It's a browser that runs out of torrents. So I'll show that in a moment. MadeSafe, you may know of. Namecoin. Do you know of these things? No. So, okay. So when I started sort of talking about this stuff a few years ago, people had said, okay, here's some projects that are really coming along. MadeSafe is an interesting group that is really trying to reinvent the web bottom up and include compensation systems for hosting in a distributed environment. Very interesting. Maelstrom by BitTorrent is a web browser that runs out of torrents. And I'll demonstrate a piece of a hack that we've got going now there. Namecoin is using the blockchain to build a distributed DNS system so that it's basically first person wins to go and declare a name to hash equivalent. So if your world works on these hashes of how do you find content in its distributed world, they're really hard to remember. These sort of phone numbers look like easy compared to trying to remember a hash. But if you can get a name to hash component, and Namecoin has a mechanism of doing that in a distributed way, building on this blockchain technology. Bitcoin for payments is pretty interesting, where money starts to have an API. And a proof of storage system that also sort of blockchain oriented to try to incent people to have storage as opposed to proof of work, which is how Bitcoin currently works. There are people that are trying to do proof of storage. There's OceanStor and I2P, neither of which I know that much about. Towards building things on JavaScript, there's PeerJ, which is a peer-to-peer structure that works on top of WebRTC that would allow us to build like a BitTorrent, but just running in JavaScript, which is pretty neat. And there's Bitcoin.js to actually do the Bitcoin whole protocol in JavaScript. The thing that the Internet Archive wants out of all of this, or things that we think we can add into this, is to make it snappy and anchor the web, this next generation web. Can we be a host in such a way that things are reliable and the versions are stored permanently? So, and not just the Internet Archive, but similar organizations around the world that are sort of our scale or size, but also can we build technologies that would work on the Freedom Boxes or these smaller devices that people are starting to make that would also sort of coordinate into this swarm that would be the next generation web hosting environment. All you have to do is have a good idea to go and make it then available to the world. You don't need to go and have a license to have a web host to do it. You just have to have a good idea and a community that might want to actually read your stuff. So there is some progress. And I thought what I try to do is go out of this and show a really, really early thing. Just to show that part of this is possible. Let's see. There. Whoop. Oh, wow. Everything came into focus. Am I online? I'm not sure I'm online. Shit. Is there open Wi-Fi here?
Good.
Yeah. And you have to type it. Right. If you just type it, you won't see it. It's on the other screen. So I'm preparing for a talk on this in Amsterdam at the end of April, and we're trying to get basically my whole blog, brewster.kahle.org, to work in this way, in a torrent that's distributed out there on the net. We don't have a distributed identity system, we don't have any of the compensation systems, there's all sorts of pieces missing, but with Maelstrom's browser, they can basically move around a torrent, which is noted here. If we get online, then it should, we're not online. Well, imagine it. I'm going to have a big demo.
Rita, where's the open Wi-Fi?
Pardon?
There's an open Wi-Fi here called NetGear.
Okay, well, I can show anybody later, but basically with a really cryptic looking URL like this at this point, because there's no good naming system for it, you can basically pull up a blog. And the idea of then doing search on client side and having little databases on the client side, basically making a WordPress able to be carted around without anybody owning or controlling it. Alright, so that didn't work. Okay, so that's the sort of progress towards this. So I'd say I've seen all of the pieces work independently. We have all of the pieces to build a distributed web that would allow this kind of thing to come about. All the technologies kind of exist, but they haven't been woven together. So the hope is that we, in the open community, come together to build something like this. Can we lock the web open? Can we bake the First Amendment into the web itself? Can we make openness irrevocable? And I'd say a component of this vision is to build a next generation web that is innately and permanently distributed. Thank you.
Really appreciate it. Very fascinating.
Any time for questions?
Yeah, definitely. I would definitely say.
Is this